Do you dream of moving to Japan? You might be watching this video because you've decided that Japan is the right place for you. But before you pack your bags, you might want to ask another important question. Are you the right person to move to Japan? I've been here about 20 years. I've seen ways of people come and go, and I've noticed some common traits of all the people who seem to make the most of their time in Japan. I'm going to share those with you today. Trait number 1, open-mindedness. Are you willing to experience things that are completely different from back home, things you're not even used to, things you've never considered? If so, then you might be the right person to come to Japan. If you've got that adventurous pioneer spirit, this is the place for you. Trait number 2, flexibility. One phrase that won't get you very far in Japan is, back home we do it like this. Remember, you're a guest here, and when you're a guest in somebody's house, you don't just go in and start rearranging the furniture. Things are just different here, and a lot of things won't make sense at first. And here's an example. My friend's wife was invited to a wedding, but he wasn't. Where I come from, wedding invitations come to the family. You bring the whole family. Or it might come to me and a +1 if I want to bring a date. I've seen weddings in the US where people just kind of show up halfway through the reception. In Japan, it's very different. Things are meticulously planned to the last detail. So if there's a formal sit-down dinner for the reception and 52 people RSVP, there will be 52 dinners served, and it will start on time and end on time. And Japanese weddings are very different. For example, you bring cash instead of gifts. There's really no wedding registry, and the bride and the groom will give gifts to the guests when they leave. And speaking of flexibility, not everybody speaks English, so you might want to think of a couple different ways to express yourself. So people won't necessarily understand if you say it's raining cats and dogs like it was yesterday. You just might have to say it was raining really hard. And remember, some people might speak English, but they might be thinking in Japanese. So just be aware that the intent is sometimes different from the words that are spoken. Trait number 3, they love to walk. Tokyo is one of the most walkable cities in the world. Think Vancouver or New York City. And imagine having everything you need 5 minutes from your front door. A gym, post office, convenience store, supermarket, even a dry cleaner. And you've heard it a million times, the trains in Japan are awesome. They're on time, they're clean, they're quiet, they're safe. And I haven't had a car in 10 years, and after about a year, I didn't even miss it. In fact, sometimes if I go out to dinner with friends and maybe have a little bit extra and I want to walk that dinner off, I'll walk home if it's about 45 minutes to an hour instead of taking a taxi. Trait number 4, they have a good sense of direction. Do you have a good sense of direction? Tokyo can be very confusing. It's very different from back home where some of the cities were planned out where they would plan the streets and then build the city around the streets. Tokyo is the exact opposite. They built the streets around the city. And around the castle, it gets particularly confusing, and they made it that way on purpose so that no army could mount a frontal assault on the castle. So Google Maps is your friend. And until you know your way around, just make sure to leave early because they don't take tardiness lightly. Trait number 5, budgeting skills. Now, this is one of the easiest ones. You got to remember that Japanese salaries are paid once a month. And it makes sense because your bills come once a month. So if you're one of those people who loves to go out partying on payday, just remember you got to wait another 4 weeks to get paid again. Trait number 6, they're comfortable in small spaces. Especially in Tokyo where I live, homes can be very small. And you're not going to have a lot of storage, so Christmas decorations, Halloween decorations, most people don't even have them. And some people, especially when you're young and get your first apartment, your living room, dining room, and bedroom could all be one room. You might have a fold-up table on the floor where you eat dinner and study, and then put that away, and then maybe put out a futon on the floor and go to sleep. And when you go out, remember, you might be in close quarters with complete strangers. So being comfortable in small spaces is a must. Trait number 7, they're good at following rules. Are you good at following rules? Are you good at following rules that don't seem to make sense? Japan is full of rules, and sometimes they're inefficient and quirky. For example, up until about a year ago, you couldn't get a doggy bag at a restaurant. So if you didn't finish your dinner, you would just have to leave it there. I tried to get to the bottom of this and found out it might have been a government regulation. See, they were worried about liability because in the summer in Japan, when it's hot and humid, if you take your food home, it takes you an hour to get home. It might be spoiled by the time you get home. And speaking of rules, you'll be filling out lots of paperwork. Are you good at filling out paperwork? Find your local city office because you're going to go there often. Trait number 8, they understand hierarchy. Now, in Japan, work is not always a meritocracy. Sometimes promotions can be given based on seniority, time at the company, or even what university you went to. See, Japanese people love to rank everybody. And one way they rank people is by what university they went to. Now, I don't think I've ever heard a Japanese person say, I graduated top of my class. The name of the university is clout enough. And if you didn't go to a Japanese university, they don't know how to rank you. It can cause a lot of confusion. Now, some of the hierarchies don't seem to make sense and they can be kind of weird to Westerners, but they do help maintain social order. Trait number 9, they don't need approval. If you need approval, I got some bad news for you. You won't get very much approval in Japan, especially at work. Just imagine the apprentice working under a sushi master for years, maybe decades, spending all their time cleaning tables, washing dishes, sharpening knives, making rice, and then after maybe a decade or so, they might be able to plate a dish of sushi and still not be able to serve the more important customers. That goes to the sushi master. And the whole time, they'll probably never hear one word of praise from their mentor. Now, personally, I need approval, so please hit the like button. Trait number 10, they're not sensitive. Are you sensitive? Once again, I got some bad news. Now, Japanese are famous for their politeness, but they can also be very blunt. Now, one of my coworkers was visiting Japan, and one of our Japanese colleagues greeted him. Instead of saying, hello, how you been, nice to see you, he stood up and went like this, you're getting fat. And he was really offended because, back where I come from, that's pretty rude. But he went to HR just to kind of bring this up and say, hey, what's going on? And the person from HR said, I don't see what the problem is. I mean, you are fat. So being sensitive is a liability. Speaking of complaining, Japanese people don't really complain that much. And in fact, people who complain are not really respected. They're kind of thought as weak. I've gone out to pubs with coworkers and sometimes the service isn't that great or they forget something in the order. And I'll mention to my coworkers like, hey, what's going on? What's wrong with the service today? And they will always give the server a break. They say, no, I haven't seen him before, he's new. Or look, they're really busy, just give him a break. And they're very understanding and very forgiving. A lot less friction in social interactions. However, there is a culture of leaving nasty reviews online. I can talk about that in another video if you'd like to hear about that. Trait number 11, selflessness. Are you selfless? In Japan, it's always important to consider everyone in the group before making a decision. And here's a really funny example of how I learned about selflessness the Japanese way. Years ago when I taught English, we went on a school trip and we had a contest. I can't remember what the contest was, but I ended up winning 10,000 yen. And money was tight, and that 10,000 yen really meant a lot to me. I was about to put it in my wallet, and one of the Japanese teachers came up and said, by the way, you're supposed to use that to buy snacks for everybody. So, a lesson in selflessness, the Japanese way. Like my friend Jeff says, just leave your selfishness at the baggage claim. Trait number 12, they're curious. Are you curious? In Japan, there's always something new to explore. There's a hiking trail, flowers blooming, a temple, a shrine, an art exhibit, a museum, a festival. There's always something going on. There's always a new food being released. There's always something happening. And if you're curious and you go out and look for those things and ask around, what's there to do this weekend, you'll find a lot of things to do. You can always be really busy. Your social calendar can always be full if you're curious. Trait number 13, resilience. Are you resilient? In a place where everything's different, you're going to need to be resilient. And when you go through culture shock, it will pay off. Resilience will get you through language barriers and cultural misunderstandings because they will happen. Trait number 14, patience. If you made it this far in the video, you've already got one of the most important traits for making it in a new country, patience. Now, Japanese love to queue up. They love to get in line. When a new donut shop or coffee shop opens up, they'll wait in line 2 hours. In fact, some people will take snacks so that they have some to eat when they get hungry when they're waiting in line. But it's kind of a national pastime. I remember when the first Starbucks opened up in Ginza, we had to wait like 2 hours to get in. But waiting in line was treated as an exciting event. Adjusting to a new country just takes time. But with the right attitude, Japan can be an incredibly rewarding experience. Trait number 15, they can read between the lines. Are you comfortable with vague and ambiguous communication styles, high context culture? This isn't just in business, but in personal life and dating as well. I always say that anything other than a yes is a no. So a lot of times Japanese people, when they translate from Japanese to English, they will say that this is going to be difficult. What they're trying to say is no, but they think that saying no is rude, so they'll just say it's difficult. Now, I was taught that if something is difficult, you just need to try harder. People told me Japanese is very difficult. It's a very difficult language. Well, that tells me instead of studying 2 hours a day, I should study 4 hours a day. But that's just me. But learning to read between the lines is critical. I had a friend whose neighbor kept telling him that his kids were very energetic, and he took that as a compliment until about a year later he learned that when you tell somebody their kids are energetic, it means they're too loud. And he was confusing the wording with the intent. He was supposed to infer that energetic means noisy. A lot of times you have to deal with lack of information. So when I taught English, I was sometimes asked to give a speech, and here's the preparation I was given. Here's a microphone, you're up. And when it was time to take school book pictures, I was told about 5 minutes before we went to take pictures. Fortunately, I was in the habit of wearing a suit to work, so I was ready. And in the defense, they had announced it at the Monday faculty meeting. But I work Tuesdays and Thursdays. And this is before email, so they couldn't just email me. And speaking of lack of information, you might notice your Japanese colleagues don't talk about themselves very much. If you want to know why, got a video about that right here. And if you've already watched that, there's a video right here YouTube thinks you'll like.